Hello friends, welcome to Feral Moon Designs. Winter is quickly coming to a close, and I think it's time to get my garden started off right this year with a mandrake. The Mandragora Officinarum is said to spring forth from the dropping fat, blood, and semen of a hanged man, possessing roots that look bizarrely like a human body. As a member of the deadly nightshade family, the mandrake is highly toxic to humans due in part to the solanine compound within, and causing side effects such as delirium, hallucinations, shock, and gastrointestinal distress. According to lore, even uprooting the mandrake is severely dangerous, as it's said that the mandrake will let out a monstrous scream bestowing agony and death to all those within earshot. So needless to say, I need to approach this project with care and caution. To do this, I'll be using Super Sculpting Original, a terracotta plant pot, some string, a couple of artificial plant stalks, aluminum foil for bulking, and wire for the armature. I'll roll up a large ball of foil around an armature wire to form the base for the head. The black disc of clay in the background was formed ahead of time and is the circumference of our terracotta pot used for comparison and later for the base. Next, I can begin covering that ball of foil with clay and working that in so that it's distributed evenly and covers the entirety. From there, it's a matter of smoothing and working out the initial details and forming the general structure of the face. Through this process, I'll be adding clay and taking away some clay. As you can see here, I'm scraping away some of the excess to form the cavity for the mouth, where I'll later add on the external lower bottom lip, before going in and adding some pre-baked balls of clay for the eyes. With those eyeballs in place, I'll add some strands of rolled out clay around the circumference of each eyeball and blend that in to really form out those eye sockets. Once the eye sockets are done, I'll add some larger rolls of clay above the eyes to form the brows. Once the general form of the eyes is complete, it's time to build up his forehead to make it more cone-shaped, because right now he kind of looks like the baby from that old dinosaurs show. It's through this process that I'll actually add the forehead wrinkles and blend those in as well. From there, I'll begin to blend that seam for the bottom lip and form out the lip itself. Next, it's time to move on to the nose. To do this, I'll add a little bit of clay and start blending that in between the eyeballs and above the top lip. Next, I'll add a couple tiny strands of clay for wrinkle detail on the bridge of the nose before going in and carving out the nostrils. And with the nose complete, it's time to define that upper lip using a strand of rolled out clay applied to the upper lip and then blend it in accordingly. With all of that done and out of the way, I'll go in next with my shaper tool and add some cracks and texture to the lips and the nose and the brows above the eyes. With those basic details out of the way, it's time I return my focus back to smoothing and building up the general shape of the face. Next, I need a base for what I guess we'll call the stalk of the Mandrake. I'll form a little cup that'll be applied to the top of his head. I'll cut jagged lines across the top. This will be what everything is fit into at the end. Along with some bacon bond, I'll use a ball stylus and press the bottom of the cup tightly into the top of his head to really create a bond and adhesion there. Next, around the outside perimeter of that stalk, I'll add a disc of clay with a jagged inner edge. This is made to kind of represent the outer shell of the plant splitting open at the top as that stalk sprouts. Once that's done, I'll add some rolled out clay along the bottom edges of the eyeballs and blend that in to form the bottom eyelid. Next up, it's time to add some wrinkles to the back of his head using some rolled out clay and then, of course, blending that in to form those wrinkles. With those wrinkles in place, the head is nearly done, but before we finish this up, it's time to add some Mandrake pimples all across his face. Now, to form a root sprout, I thought I would put some string in the polymer clay itself and attach that. Later on, I'll fray that out and add some paint to represent that root growth off of the plant itself. And with our head complete, it's time to form a quick base. This doesn't really matter. You'll see why here in a little bit. But moving on from that, it's time to start the body. To start off, I'll add the head and just create a general idea for the body itself. I'll bulk it out, take away, and detail as I need moving forward. Using some bacon bond, I'll attach the head and start blending that neck into the head itself. Once that's all blended, I can start using some rolled out clay strands to add the wrinkle details around the neck. Once that's done, I'll follow that same process over the entirety of the rest of the body. I'll also use my tool to add some line detail and texture as well. Next up, it's time for some more Mandrake pimple application across the body. And of course, we have to add more root growth. And with that, our Mandrake is complete. It's time to attach him to the base. I'll use some bacon bond, apply him to the base itself, and then using some rolled out clay, I'll blend the Mandrake to the base. With that complete, we'll throw it in the oven for a quick bake, and let's move on to that plant pot. My goal is to take this brand new flawless terracotta pot and make it old. To do so, I'm going to start off with a base coat of dark brown. Next, I'll go over that base coat with a sponge using a lighter shade of brown. Once that's dry, I'll go over the entire thing with a heavy whitewash to represent the calcium buildup or lime scaling in the pot. To tone that back down, I'll go over it once again with that lighter shade of brown and a sponge. Then, using a tiny amount of white paint on the sponge, I'll accentuate some of that white highlighting. For a moss-stained effect, I'll use a little bit of green paint with the sponge as well. I'll follow all of this up with a quick black wash. Once the aging process is complete, I'll go over the detail with a quick coat of black. And once that black base coat is dry, I'll go over that detailed trim with a metallic gold. I'll give it a quick coat of matte varnish, and with that, the pot is complete. Returning my focus to the Mandrake now, it's time to give this boy a base coat of brown. And now, while he kinda looks like a fecal demon from Dogma, it's time to go in and add the black paint to the inside of the mouth, as well as a little green detail around the base of the stalk. And with that out of the way, now begins my long, painful process of dry brushing shades of orange and light brown to create the tone that I want. Eventually, I'll decide to go a little heavier on the paint, then apply a black wash and dry brush from that point. May have taken a few extra steps to get here, but I'm kind of glad it panned out the way it did, because ultimately in the end I'm very happy with the tone and saturation of the color that I ended up with. With the body and face painted, it's time to move on to the eyes. I'm going to throw a coat of black paint onto the eyeballs. From there, I'll go in with a shade of gray and a dark brown and paint over some of those Mandrake pimples. Quick coat of matte varnish across the face and body, and then it's on to those root sprouts. To start off, I'll pull apart the strands on each of the strings. Once those strands have been separated, I'll take a brush with dark brown paint and go over each of those strings. Once this dries, it'll make them stiff and more pliable. I can shape them the way that I want and go in and trim them up to the size that I so choose. Now that that's done, it's time to move on to those Mandrake berries. I made these off camera just using balls of clay on some wire and a little bit of leaf detail on top. A very simple process here with marigold on the berries and then green on the leaves. Once the paint has dried, I'll go over that with a coat of UV resin and then using my UV flashlight to cure it. I'll then repeat the same process on the eyeballs. Things are quickly coming together now, and it's time to move back to the plant pot. I'll stuff the bottom with newspaper, and then using PVA glue and floral foam, I'll pad out the top portion of the pot. Next, I'll be using silicone to attach the sculpt to the pot itself before going around the perimeter of the sculpt base to fill that in. Now while I wait on that to dry, it's time to age up some paper. To do this, I'll be using a plain sheet of printer paper, a paper towel filled with instant coffee grounds, dipped in a bowl of water and smudged across the paper on both sides while using a hairdryer to dry the paper as needed. Once this is done, I'll set it aside to let it completely dry before I run it through my printer to print out our Mandrake label. And while I wait, let's get back to that Mandrake. Now that silicone has dried, it's time to go in and add a base coat of black to cover up all that white. Once that base coat is dry, I'll go over that with a dark brown. Once the paint is dry, I'll go over all of that with a diluted PVA glue mixture before going over it with a generous sprinkling of dark brown ballast to serve as the dirt. I'll give this a quick spritz of isopropyl alcohol to help spread the glue before going in with a dropper filled with more of that diluted PVA glue. Next, I'll brush on some of that diluted glue mixture around the base of the stalk before going in with some moss and filling that in for detail. After giving the ballast some time to dry, I'll go in with some PVA glue and add moss to the top of the ballast as well. Once I've got the moss in place, I'll repeat the process with the isopropyl alcohol and the PVA glue dilution dropper as well. Giving that glue proper time to dry now, it's time to move on to those leaves. I'm going to go in with a dry brush of browns and purples on the base here, just to break up some of that green. Once that's done, I'll trim the stems and it's on to assembly. Using hot glue right in the top of that stem base, I'll go ahead and add some of those berries first. I'll top this off with another shot of hot glue before it's time to add the leaves. A little more hot glue now, and I'll add the final berry before accidentally off camera topping it off with a little bit of gray moss. Final step now, our paper is dry and I've printed out the Mandrake label I created in Affinity Photo. It's time to put this on the pot. To do this, I'll simply be using a glue stick and then simply applying it to the pot, being sure to smooth it out with no wrinkles. Another quick dab of glue stick on the outside to seal it, and folks, there's nothing left to do but move on to the showcase. Folks, I want to take a quick moment to thank you for watching. If you made it this far in the video, please be sure to click that like button. Your likes and shares help the channel out tremendously, and I very much appreciate it. If this is your first time watching, consider hitting the subscribe button and join us next time. But regardless, thanks again, and until the next video, you take care. I'll see you soon, friends.